Okay, we'll get started here in a few moments. This is the second video for White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. We're going to be talking about the first 20 pages of the book, or the first, if you're listening to it, it'll be the second 30 minutes of the audiobook. I took a lot of notes this morning. I feel like I did it for over a half hour, so maybe like 35 minutes. It took me to read 20 pages. Usually that would make me upset. However, I feel like I'm going to learn a lot more by doing it this way. But let's go ahead and just get started. So the first 20 pages or so, I wrote notes down to kind of talk about what DiAngelo was talking about, and I was definitely challenged on some of these ideas, and I'll talk about which ones I was challenged on while I talk about the different things. So once again, when I say we, I'm meaning we as white people. So white is not a universal experience. Not everyone experiences life like a white person. This should be obvious, however, it's not to a lot of people. We must first, at the very beginning, name our race. We are white. So, like, just saying that many years ago would have kind of bothered me, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit. Nothing in U.S. culture just gives white people the knowledge of the most complex social dynamic, which is race. We must learn about race and racism. Professionals can get degrees without learning about racism. So she talked about how teachers can get degrees without learning anything about racism. They might take a diversity class, but racism rarely is actually directly talked about. People can, become professionals in their businesses and never talk about racism in their classes. A lot of people give racism a very simple and maybe misleading definition. They think that it is racial discrimination committed by immoral people. This is a woefully inadequate definition, and it's part of the problem. So we must look at our cultural framework as white people, but two things stand in our way. It's individualism and objectivity. And as Americans, individualism is huge, and it's the main obstacle that I have to overcome when it comes to this particular discussion. Individualism claims that failure comes from individual character, and success is available for everyone, regardless of who they are or what level of social status they are, or race, or gender. But in reality, it's not true, because U.S. culture is pushing forth this idea of otherness while trying to grab hold of this whole idea of individualism. And culture is teaching people at a very young age, popular culture, that it's okay to be a part of some groups but not a part of other groups. And if you're a part of this group, you'll be accepted more than being a part of that group. And we just have to look at just the very idea of when we think about people applying for a job, and we look at a woman trying to apply for a job in a male-dominated field, or a non-able person applying for jobs that an able person would want. These are things that segregate us, and to say that there is no like community groupings just goes against like what we say in other instances. Like that person is a young, able individual, and so they probably will be more successful than this older, non-able individual. And it spreads to like race, gender, sexual orientation. So the popular culture is what's causing these issues. I'll probably talk about that more. Mainstream culture tells us that the groups that are better, we understand who we are by who we are not. We must accept we have biases. White people get mad at generalizing groups because of individualism and objectivity. And this, like I was saying, individualism, generalizations is a thing that I have a hard time getting over. And it's so ingrained in my mind that it's so difficult for me to get over that hump. So hopefully through reading this I can get over that. We must see the collective messages shared by the larger shared culture. And we must accept our discomfort on racism. Race is a social construct, superficial. All it is adaptations to geography. Everyone is the same biologically underneath the color of our skin. Like everything else is the same. We exploited people for their resources first, and then created an ideology around races as being inferior to justify us exploiting other people. Coates says that race is the child of racism, not the father. If we really believe that all humans are equal, as what we have in our Bill of Rights and our Constitution in America, if we really believe in all men are created equal, then disparity must be a systematic issue, must be a systematic discrimination. Poor white people experience classism. They don't experience racism. Those above poor white people actually use racism to give the poor white people someone to look down upon, to keep them in check, and to make them continue to work their low-paying jobs for cheap labor. So, in other words, a poor white person will feel better about themselves if they have another group of individuals below them that they look down upon. But that in turn will keep them in the place that they're at currently. And really important that all humans have some sort of prejudice. Prejudice isn't necessarily a bad thing. Society and popular culture create it. It just happens. We have to look at prejudice as not a bad thing. Discrimination from prejudice is the bad thing. So we all have our biases, we all have our prejudices. And so we got to stop like being so defensive when we talk about prejudices. So, and really look at discrimination. So that was the first like 20 pages. That was the notes I took on those pages. Pretty good stuff so far. A good book so far. I'm enjoying it. So I will see everyone tomorrow for another video for the next 20 pages or the next 30 minutes in the audiobook.